And welcome inside the Sports Guys podcast.com, also affiliated with the Backstage Pass, powered by that very website and presented by our friends over at Bangtail Whiskey and, of course, Honky Tonk Texas out there. It's a Friday. It's a matinee show. I love doing these because I get a chance to talk Major League Baseball with one of the best in the business, Rangers TV broadcaster, and, of course, host of the Loud Outs podcast, MLB Network Radio, my good friend, CJ Nitkowski. CJ, how you doing, brother?
Brandon, I'm doing fantastic, man. How are you?
It's a good Friday, man. It's a good. The races are heating up. We're almost to the trade deadline for Major League Baseball. Fantastic, great races. Let's start right there, the AL West, because here's a team that you see on an everyday basis, a team that really spent the last couple of off seasons, Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, to kind of shape that. Young kids coming up like Josh Young, playing their tails off and really figuring out how to hit Major League pitching. And then you add some guys, Andrew Heaney, Nathan Eovaldi. Talk about just how real this Texas Rangers team is this year for contention.
They're absolutely real contenders. And as you mentioned, this has kind of been a couple of years in the making. You go back to 2 off seasons ago when they signed Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, spent all that money to bring in a new middle infield. Those guys have been terrific, but there was something that was missing, and that was the starting pitching. 2 years ago, they had given a lot of young pitchers some opportunities. There was some good in there. There was some bad. There were some growing pains, and that was to be expected. And this year they addressed that in a really big way. It was Jacob deGrom, Nate Eovaldi, Andrew Heaney, as you mentioned, Jake Odorizzi, as well was a player that they brought over that made sure that they got Martin Perez back in a Ranger uniform. And then John Gray was already here. He was signed 2 years ago. Now deGrom is out for the year and then some because of Tommy John surgery. Jake Odorizzi is out for the year. We're never going to see him in a Ranger uniform. And so some of the depth has already been tested. But what you really look around with this team, the big moves that they had made, there was a plan in place. They executed that plan. They've gotten off to a great start. They've slowed down a little bit here lately, but the offense is strong. The starting pitching is strong. And for the most part, they're in every game. I mean, that's the thing is you come to the ballpark every day or you watch your Rangers or listen to them on the radio, and you have a legitimate chance to win a game every single day based on the lineup and the starting pitcher that they're throwing out there. They haven't had that feeling here in a really long time.
Yeah, it's great to see. I wanted to ask you about this too, because I think one of the biggest inspirations there is a guy who's done it, been there, done that, won the rings, 3 of them with the San Francisco Giants. The guy I'm talking about is Bruce Bochy, and just the impact, CJ, he's had on the clubhouse.
So he's been huge. And I think a couple of things. Obviously, you mentioned all the players that you bring in, but you need a leader at the top. And there's something about having an experienced guy who has nothing to prove to anybody, right? He is just here because he's competitive. He wants to win, and he likes the roster and believes that they have a legitimate chance to do those things. And then you get a guy also because he's kind of been there and done that there's a real calming presence to what he does. There's a great respect for Bruce Bochy around the game, but certainly now in this clubhouse in particular, I think that's what you really notice. That's what the guys will talk about. It's something about having Bruce Bochy there when he speaks. Everyone listens. He picks his spots, right? Doesn't over communicate, which can be a problem sometimes, and especially now with coaching staffs expanding the way that they are. Sometimes I think you do get coaches that feel like they want to make sure they get everything out there, and then they end up sharing too much information or just overdo it a little bit, and the communication lacks, and then that becomes problematic, and you start to lose players. I mean, at the end of the day, these are athletes, and they're men, and as men, we got short attention spans, and I think Bruce Bochy kind of really understands that as he gets to the point. It's quick, but it resonates with the guys, and I think it's been working out terrifically.
The All-Star break's coming up around the corner. Of course, the voting is going on for another week as far as getting down to the top 2 or 3 finalists per category, whoever moves on. Adolis Garcia, my goodness, 15 homers, 55 runs batted in, OPS of over 800. I mean, here's a guy that former All-Star who's just 30 years of age, but a guy who is locked in about as any hitter CJ is right now.
I think the Rangers are really happy with the decision that Garcia made, and that was to skip the WBC. And there was a big part of that for him is because he was working on some things. Even though he had a pretty good year last year, he wanted to improve upon that. He wanted to chase less. He wanted to strike out less, but still be the great hitter that he is. He is a guy that is built for big moments. We see it consistently from him and have since ever since he's put on that Ranger uniform. But what we noticed in the work that he had done is that he's cut his chase down significantly. And that's not an easy thing to do. When you're an aggressive power hitter who's up for the big moments and you want to drive the ball, it happens all the time. You see guys expand the zone. At what rate you expand the zone is a pretty big deal, right? You start to overdo it a little bit. Pitchers are going to take advantage of that, and there's going to be a lot of holes in your swing. And so Garcia spent spring training working on that, and he's gotten results. What's interesting, we showed a graphic on Thursday night's broadcast of how many times he struck out looking. And he's already struck out looking 13 times this year. All of last year, it was 16. And your first thought will be like, well, that's not good. He's striking out looking more.
Mm-hmm.
But his OPS is significantly higher. And so that's been kind of the payoff, right? When you're going to make that decision that you're not going to expand the zone, that you're going to be a little bit more selective, you're going to take some more strikes looking. That's kind of the tax that you have to pay on making that change. But he's done that without giving up power. If anything, he's actually added as that OPS, the on-base plus slugging, is up. So while you'll see him take a few more strikes, the exchange, the work that he did in spring training has really paid off.
Yeah, you look at this AL West right now. I mean, the Astros are not the same Astros as they've been the past 6 years. Of course, there's still a lot of baseball to be played, but here's a club falling on some hard times. The loss of Lance McCullers, Luis Garcia for the season, Jordan going down now, the big bopper for a month with the oblique. We were in surprise there where I got to meet you this past year, and I told people the conversation was Texas Rangers are for real, guys, whether you accept it or not this year with the pitching, even with the loss of DeGrom that you mentioned there too as well. But I still think right now, like you mentioned, the real contention, and I'm not surprised the Astros are still in it at 9 over, just 3.5 back in the West too. But this is going to be some interesting decisions by each team's general manager at the trade deadline.
No doubt. And the only way you were going to take the Astros down was going to be probably some guys underperforming or some major injuries. And those two things have happened. And now the West is a lot more open. The Rangers have led it most of the way. I think nobody is discounting the Houston Astros. I will say I think the Mariners have been somewhat of a disappointment. I thought that they would be more of a contender. They certainly have the pitching to get back in this thing. And we just saw the Angels for 4 days, and they look pretty good. They're starting to heat up a little bit. Their bullpen is terrific. They've made some significant changes in their bullpen, and that is yielding some really good results right now. But the Astros are, of course, the team that everybody focuses on because they have been the best team in this division for a while now. And so the fact that they're dealing with injuries, not having Jose Altuve for the first couple of months of the season after he got hurt in the WBC probably helped the other teams in this division as well. But they're still a really good team. They're a dangerous team. They've done a really nice job with the young pitchers that have had to fill in. As you mentioned, Garcia, Urquidy's been down for a while. No Lance McCullers Jr. And so they've really had to tap into their depth. Remember, this was a year in which they allowed Justin Verlander to walk in free agency and didn't really make a hard push to bring him back. And he's just been okay. So they probably did the right thing by not giving him the really big money to do it. But they've had some young guys like Hunter Brown and France and Bielak do a really nice job filling in the rotation. So nobody is discounting the Houston Astros. They've been too good in the past. They're too experienced, even though it is looking like a different club this year.
Well, I'll tell you another guy who's really come on strong, the first-round pick in 2019 of the area, Texas Tech. We know very well down here, being from Texas, and, of course, keeping track of this guy. Josh Young, I mean, my God, the power's there, OPS over 830, 13 homers and 40 runs, batted in over 280. Anything in baseball over me, 280 is very respectable, no doubt about it, when it comes to being a slugger at the hot corner. What have you liked? What have you seen? The plate approach, the discipline. I mean, defense has been pretty good for him too, and the impact he's made for the ball club.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. He's been fantastic, and for me, better than expected. We saw him last year when he finally got his first taste of the big leagues. He had battled injuries, COVID, some things that got in the way. We thought we were going to see him earlier in a Ranger uniform, but we got a sample last year. We saw a high strikeout rate. We saw some power in that low batting average, and I think we saw, quite honestly, average to below average defense, at least that first taste. Then all of a sudden now you go through spring training, you get to this year, every young guy has to go through it and kind of feel it out a little bit and see where you stand. What do I have to improve on? And Josh Young across the board has improved on everything. You mentioned it. The defense has been terrific. He has looked so much quicker, in my opinion, this year than what we saw last year. The feet look a lot quicker. I was concerned about left side of the infield defense, and it has exceeded expectations. And so the guys have put the work in, Josh Young in particular. He's cut down on his strikeouts, right? Again, you know how hitters are going to attack you. The learning process, or at least the information that comes in, happens faster than it ever has in the game of baseball. So Josh Young learning from what he saw last year, what to expect. You take your deep breath and your exhale in the offseason, you go do the work, and he's gotten the production. Another guy that's done a good job on cutting down Chase. He's still going to be aggressive at times, but it's worked out really well. He's been terrific. He's been one of the better third basemen in the game. He's a leading candidate right now for the American League Rookie of the Year, and at least for my expectations, he has exceeded them based on what we saw a year ago.
No doubt. We'll take a quick time out here on the show. More with CJ Nitkowski, the Loud Outs Podcast, MLB Network Radio, Texas Ranger Baseball, and, of course, come back and talk about some different divisions here. Who's on fire? The Arizona Diamondbacks, who I'm a fan of too as well, have really stepped their game up this year too as well. And definitely we'll talk about are the Tampa Bay Rays for real coming up here in the American League. Quick time out. More with CJ here. It is the Sports Guys Podcast.com. Stay tuned.
The Bangtail pour is comprised of a sweet corn mash base, The front has a subtle sweetness and not too sharp. It has notes of a medium char or white oak for a smoky flavor in the middle, and the tail has a super smooth and warm finish.
Go behind the scenes with some of the biggest artists in music today with the Backstage Pass, powered by the SportsGuysPodcast.com. Join Brandon Morrill and his co-host Kirsty Krause as they talk to rising stars and legends about their music careers. Listen to their latest tracks and learn fun facts about the men and women behind the music you love. And be sure to tune into the Backstage Pass Monday through Friday from 3:30 to 6:30, powered by the SportsGuysPodcast.com. And welcome into the Backstage Pass. And back here with CJ Nitkowski, a couple of music shows coming up here today at the SportsGuysPodcast.com, also HighTideCountry.net, talking some baseball here on the sports aspect of things. Major League Baseball getting ready for the trade deadline, the All-Star break coming up in July. A whole lot of fun, great races out there. Speaking of the AL East, I mean, the first team to get to 50 wins this year with a low payroll. They always seem to do it somehow, some way. I think Kevin Cash has a lot to do with that too as well, and just the performance of the players. Wander Franco staying healthy. What have you liked? What have you seen? And is this Tampa Bay ball club for the Rays? Are they for real this year?
They are. I mean, obviously they're doing it in a really tough division. That one runs deep in the American League East right now. They continue to kind of do the things that they've always done with the formula of platoon play. You mentioned, of course, having a star like Wander Franco certainly helps in the health. The emergence of Randy Arozarena, Yandy Diaz, but also the young players now that have come up and helped out as well. They're a very complete team. They run their pitching staff incredibly efficiently. What they do in the bullpen, and they've had some ups and some downs there, but they look like they've kind of worked through that. They appear to be back on track, even though they had a little bit of a questionable series against the Oakland A's, dropping a couple there. Nobody really saw that coming, but this team is really good. And I think a healthy Tyler Glasnow, it was really important, right, getting him back and into that rotation. The fact that they were able to remain a first-place team without him, much like the Rangers were able to do without Jacob deGrom, is key. I mean, that's just hugely helpful. You can play well without having one of your top starters. And of course, they have Shane McClanahan in there as well. Taj Bradley has been really, really good. A ton of strikeouts for him. I believe it was 10 in his last start against the Oakland A's. So he's really emerging. They continue to develop really good pitching, and they continue to figure out ways to get things out of pitchers that most teams cannot. It's just one of those things. Jake Diekman, as an example, was really struggling. He gets released. All of a sudden, the Rays pick him up. And whenever that happens, right, the guys, you're wondering, okay, what are they going to do? What are they going to figure out, even if it's a veteran? They've done that with consistency. It's really kind of incredible to see. I think they're the envy of the entire league, based on payroll, based on development, and based on how they figure out to get the most out of their pitchers.
Yeah, and you look at that division too. You mentioned that, Phil. We were talking about 50 wins for Tampa, but I mean the Baltimore Orioles trying to play better and playing significantly better at 43-25. Here's a franchise we knew we were going to turn it around over the last couple of years. Really can't catch a break with 5 games back right now, and a ball club 28 games over 500. That being Tampa. Baltimore, Brandon Hyde, the impact he's made there, and just how Mike Elias has come over from the Astros, adopted the philosophy there as the president of business operations, and kind of running some of the front office stuff there. They've made some wise choices in Baltimore too to turn this thing around.
They have, and they've been really patient. Last year was tough to watch them trade away a couple of significant pieces while they were playing well. They were a huge surprise last year, and so to see Trey Mancini and Jorge Lopez get traded away while they were playing well was a tough pill to swallow, and Brandon Hyde was pretty honest about that. There's a part of me that has respected the fact that they stuck with the plan, even when your team surprises a little bit. You have to be careful as far as what that does to the clubhouse, but that's paid off because this year has been even better. Bringing in a guy like Kyle Gibson, I thought was a really interesting sign. They did not exercise their option on Jordan Lyles. I thought they were somewhat similar. Maybe Kyle Gibson a little bit better. We've had both of those pitchers here with the Texas Rangers. That decision ended up being a really big one. Jordan Lyles is scuffling a little bit here with the Kansas City Royals, and Kyle Gibson has been great. But it's the emergence of the young players. I think it's what makes this team so exciting right now. In Baltimore, Gunnar Henderson is swinging a really good bat right now. Jorge Mateo had gotten off to a really great start. Austin Hayes is emerged as a really good everyday big leaguer. Of course, Anthony Santander has been there for a little while. And then Adley Rutschman. Adley Rutschman behind the plate is a superstar. And so that was a good draft pick for them. That's working out well during the lean years when they weren't playing well, and to be able to get those high draft picks. They've been successful with that so far. They're a good team. They're a dangerous team. They're absolutely for real. And the back end of that bullpen is phenomenal.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, too, with the big series starting tonight with Toronto coming to play at Texas, it's going to be a huge series coming up this weekend. And, of course, the race being real close with the Astros and getting there for the 3-game series coming up in July. This is going to be just kind of fun. And I think even you look at the Minnesota Twins in the overall picture of the American League Central. The way their pitching has been this year, Sonny Gray, and just a cast of guys who may have been written off in years past, but guys starting to step up, play for Rocco Baldelli, and this Twins team is kind of fun to watch.
It is fun to watch. You know, they had all the Carlos Correa kind of drama from the last year, and they get through that, and he's been okay for them. I think they've certainly expected a little bit more in dealing with some injuries. But you bring up a good point about the pitching. Sonny Gray has been great. Joe Ryan was good last year. He's been really good. They trade for Pablo Lopez, get him extended. They run deep with their starting pitching. And it's a really weak division right now. They haven't played as well as they would have liked to. They've gotten Byron Buxton back, right? So that's some good news for them and that big bat and a guy that they've had a hard time keeping healthy. Right now, the way things stand, they probably should be the team on top here when this thing is all said and done. But listen, at the same time, you know, we look at the Cleveland Guardians, the Chicago White Sox. These were teams that had much higher expectations. They've been disappointments so far, especially offensively for the Guardians.
Yeah, and you look at back to the National League too, and a team that just continues to impress time and time again after winning the 2021 World Series championship against the Astros. The Atlanta Braves, I like everything I've seen about them. Deep lineup there too. It seems like 1 through 9. Sean Murphy, a great acquisition of the offseason of what he's meant to the ball club too as well. 5 games in front of the surprising Miami Marlins. But I think the biggest disappointment outside of the Braves being the best thing for the National League East has been the New York Mets.
The Mets have been a disaster, highest payroll in baseball by a wide margin. It's just unacceptable where they are right now. And I no doubt that Steve Cohen and Buck Showalter and everybody involved is really frustrated. Pete Alonso, of course, is on the IL right now, but this team should be playing much better baseball than it is. And right now it seems like, you know, they made a mistake, right? Betting on some of the older guys, and eventually they were going to run out of gas. But, you know, Max Scherzer's been pretty inconsistent. At times you see a little bit of a version of the old one. Then you see somewhat of a setback. Justin Verlander, same thing. Like his last start in the Subway Series against Garrett Cole was really good, but he hasn't been consistent enough either. The offense really hasn't come through. It seems like they're going through periods where some of the guys are producing and others are not. They just can't kind of get going on all cylinders at the same time. So that's been a real problem for the New York Mets, and they got to figure out a way to get it together. Finally, Starling Marte, Mark Canha are swinging better bats. I think when you talk about depth of lineup, those are a couple of really important pieces. But Francisco Lindor has been a disappointment so far this year. There's been some power there, but overall, the offense is not what they paid for. And so right now, this is an over-bloated payroll that is looking for answers, and they've done it with some of the younger players. And there's been some up and down there as well with guys like Brett Beatty and Vientos. Alvarez has been pretty good for power. He's been good behind the plate, but the overall offensive numbers, there's certainly some struggles in there. So they're trying to put this puzzle together. It has not worked so far.
You look at that National League West, a team that's really surprised a lot of people, and maybe not some so surprising when it comes down to it, because they did have the youth. And you see ever since the Zach Greinke trade and what they were trying to do, get younger and give these guys all the experience, go through what Houston did back in the day, go through those 100 lost seasons and kind of the malarkey of that, and get better and give these guys all the playing time and develop these players. The Diamondbacks, CJ, have looked really good this year, and it's pretty cool to see another team kind of come out of this and challenge the Dodgers in that NL West.
Yeah, the Padres thought they were going to be that team, and they're starting to get their act together, but they're still not there. They're still under 500, and so luckily the Arizona sorry about that. The Diamondbacks have been that team that has seemed to do really good work right now. And so they're very athletic, right? I think that's one of the things with them that makes them fun to watch. They have themselves a superstar in Corbin Carroll. They made sure that they got him locked up. He has been terrific this year. But I think one of the things that sticks out with them, and most people probably not tracking this team very closely, is the work of the starting rotation, right? There's been a couple of really good arms that have done good work. Most people, I think, probably know about Zach Gallen, but Merrill Kelly's been really good this year. Ryan Nelson has done some pretty good work for them as well. They're still working through a couple of things in the back end of the rotation. But overall here for the Arizona Diamondbacks, they seem like a real team. It's been, I think, a nice surprise. And it's fun to watch these athletic teams that put the ball in play and make things happen. And the D-backs are one of those type of teams.
You know, last summer, CJ, we saw a very active trade deadline. Juan Soto, and, of course, big moves there between the Nationals and the Padres. Of course, a lot of big names. More trades than we'd seen probably in previous 4 or 5 years there of guys that have been moved to help out contending ball clubs. The buy-or-sell conversations are starting now amongst general managers, or at least kind of the gut checks, and kick the tires on this, whether it be waiver claims or the trade deadline coming up now. It's August 1st. What do you see kind of happening? Are we expecting an active one? And some of the big names that you kind of see the early GMs are checking in on right now who could be moved?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think you start doing your homework right now, but the reality is that there's a couple of teams that don't know who they are just yet. The St. Louis Cardinals have been terrible. Would they be selling? They've never done it before, and it certainly wasn't even on probably the radar for them as a possible game plan come deadline time. They would have certainly some interesting pieces, a guy like Jack Flaherty. I would say the same thing for the Chicago White Sox, thinking about potential free agents like Lucas Giolito. Could be a guy. There's others there as well on that roster. So I think first things first, you got to figure out who are the non-contenders. We know, of course, teams like the Kansas City Royals, Colorado Rockies, they have some pieces. They're not contenders. The Oakland A's, I don't know how many tradable pieces they really have, but we know those teams are not going to be contending for the postseason. There's going to be a lot of competition. And I think for fan bases, they will look at their particular team and say, hey, we need this guy, we need this reliever, starter, whatever it may be. Let's go get him now. The asking price is just way too high. To try to get out in front of this thing right now for potential available players is a huge challenge for general managers. If you're trying to bulk up your bullpen and you want to get a Aroldis Chapman or one of those pieces from the Kansas City Royals, it's just the price right now is going to be too high. As we get a little bit closer to that deadline, we've got about 6 or so weeks to go. Things will start to shape up a little bit more, but there will be action. It'll be busy. It always is, but the asking price leading up to it will always seem like it's too high.
Yeah, of course, like you said, plenty of baseball to be played because some of these teams, Pittsburgh Pirates, we really talked about today too, but some of these young stars in the game starting to take over, which is just really cool for the game. Hey, real quick before I let you go, I got to talk about this because today starts the Men's College World Series in Omaha. I like Wake Forest a lot, and I think this is about as deep as an 8-team field that we've seen in a long time, and all these clubs are going to have first-round picks coming up this year. Some of the top players in the nation. I like Wake Forest. Who are you kind of putting your chips on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't follow it closely enough to give you a real analysis on who I think will win the entire thing, but it's been great to see. Oral Roberts is a really nice story locally here at TCU, has been a good one as well. But I think the bigger picture for me is I love seeing the access and how much we are seeing college baseball on television and kind of gaining some momentum right now. I think it's been really good over the last couple of years. So that continues to happen, but it doesn't come without problems either. The transfer portal to me, while certainly want to have guys have that ability to transfer, but with that now and NIL money, it's getting a little weird, right? You got some players that are playing, they're playing well at even big schools, and they go to another school. Right, you find out about them entering the transfer portal. That really wasn't the idea behind having the ability to transfer. Right, if you had a bad relationship with a coach, or you weren't playing, or there was something else academically that was better for you, you wanted to have that flexibility to be able to transfer. But good players who are playing all the time and putting up numbers, essentially leaving for an opportunity, maybe to go to just another big program, probably cashing in on NIL money. I'm already hearing those stories around the game. I mean, I get it. I want guys to have the opportunity to take advantage of their college years, but now we got really good players moving around. I don't love that part as much, but I love college baseball. Was fortunate to play it, fortunate to pitch in a regional in the past, and it's a great time and they're great memories. But the game has changed, and it's a little bit more difficult to navigate it. As a father of a couple of boys and one in high school now is going to have a chance to play in college. That part is really tricky as well with the new rules and everything else, and verbal commitments and coaches pulling back commitments. It's dicey, that world right now, and trying to navigate it is a real challenge. But with all that being said, it's going to be a great World Series. A lot of big names, as you mentioned, are going to be on display.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, I want to ask you about this because you were part of those teams back in the 90s, those great Astro teams that went to the National League Central Championship, won that respective divisions. And you look at guys that are now Hall of Famers, Craig Biggio, Jeff Bagwell. What were they like as teammates?
Yeah, I got to spend 1 year there in 1998. And that was a good year for the Astros. We won 102 games, got bounced in the first round, though, against the San Diego Padres, who went on to get swept by the New York Yankees that season. We traded for Randy Johnson, which was a lot of fun. But, Bags and Bidge were great teammates, great players, a lot of fun to spend some time with them. It's great to see them now every time we get back into Houston. Of course, Baggy in the front office, also doing some radio and television work for the Houston Astros. So it's great to run into him, Bidge doing his work in the front office, and of course, his son playing for the Toronto Blue Jays. So actually, I think there's probably a decent chance that Craig Biggio will be here in Arlington this weekend with his son playing and just coming up from Houston to watch him in person. But yeah, I feel very fortunate. I can't remember the number now. I kind of stopped counting, but I think I'm up to about 17 or 18 former teammates or managers that are in the Hall of Fame with all the bouncing around that I did. So definitely cool to call those guys, a couple of them.
To the classiest guys in Major League Baseball. You're one of the best out there. The Loud Outs podcast, MLB Network Radio, and, of course, Texas Rangers TV out there, the one, the only CJ Nitkowski. CJ, appreciate the time today, and, of course, enjoyed our chat and looking forward to doing it again sometime this year before the end of the season.
Sounds good, Brandon. My pleasure to join you.
You got it. CJ Nitkowski at the sportsguyspodcast.com. Coming back with a couple of music interviews this afternoon. Stick around for a lot more. Have a terrific weekend. We'll see you soon.